On Overdrive today, we bring you specifics of what makes the Mercedes-AMG EQS an electrifying proposition and tell you what's new in the luxurious Audi A8 L. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini Dutt. The Mercedes-AMG EQS 53 has big shoes to fill considering it's the first all-electric AMG from Mercedes-Benz, and it also has the 55-year-old legacy of big, torquey and hand-built V8 engines to look after. So Simran was out with the AMG EQS 53 to find out whether it lives up to all of its expectations.
Change is constant. Change is also inevitable. And with the auto industry moving towards going fully electric by the end of the decade, change is coming fast. And if you're the in-house tuning brand of one of the world's leading luxury car makers, like AMG is, that change is coming very, very fast. This is the AMG EQS 53. It's the first electric car to come out of Autobac. And obviously there's a lot of hope riding on it because this previews that change. We're going to see what it's like. While the EQS 53 lacks some of the visual drama usually associated with AMGs, you know, the flared wheel arches, the power domes on the hood, and of course quad exhaust pipe, it's got plenty of presence. The EQS is a large sedan at 5.2 meter long on a 3.2 meter long wheelbase, so it really isn't escaping how much space it takes up on the road. Still, 21-inch wheels fill up the arches well enough, and the selenite grey paint add menace, if only in small doses. From behind the wheel of the EQS 53, does it feel like an AMG? Well, the quick answer is yes, it does, but it also feels like a very modern AMG because though the seat lets you get quite low in the car, the hyperscreen takes up quite a bit of real estate. It feels like a bottom third or a little more of a bottom third of your vision is just taken up by all that massive screen real estate. You can fix that by moving your seat a little higher up so you get a better view out the car, but then you lose some of that connect with the car, and being an EV, that connect is already in short supply. Now what I mean by that is that in any AMG, you get in and when you press that starter button, the 6-cylinder or the V8, whatever the case may be, it roars to life. And in the EQS 53, you do get a synthesized sound, but it's obviously not quite the same thing. Now when you get rolling, this thick rim steering wheel plus the AMG in front of you, it all gives you hints that you're in an AMG, albeit a big heavy AMG. Now the closest comparison that I can think of would be something like the GT4, the GT63, and that car is a whole different beast. Obviously it's got that bi-turbo V8, but it's also a lot more hardcore, and what I'm really missing is that center console that's sort of laid out to remind you of the banks of a V8. This though, there's a lot more space here. But from behind the wheel, especially when you set the instrumentation in one of its more futuristic modes, it really makes you feel like you're pretty much in the next decade instead of this. And I suppose that's what the EQS 53 is trying to show us. What performance motoring is going to look like 10 years from now. While the EQS 53 is based on the EQS 580 also coming to India, its twin electric motors, one on each axle, have been tuned by AMG. And wound by one man? I sure hope so. All India cars come with the Dynamic Plus pack as standard, which pumps power up to 761 PS and 1020 Nm of torque, available for a short time when the race start launch is activated. Claim 0 to 100 kmph is 3.4 seconds, and we managed 3.6 on a hot day. AMG has also upped the cooling since heat is the real enemy of an EV. With a 107.8 kWh battery, the 586 km WLTP range is the real talking figure. We estimate close to 500 km in the real world, though driving it like an AMG should be, can still probably get you well over 350 km. Mercedes is setting up 180 kW ultra-fast DC chargers across its network, and the EQS can charge at up to 200 kW. Of course, a big concern with an electric AMG is whether it still has that emotion, and the quick answer is no, not quite. it doesn't have all that sound, it doesn't have all that fury, it doesn't have all that anger when you put your foot down, but it does have all that speed and more. In fact, the duality of the nature of this AMG is even more pronounced just by how silent and comfortable it is when you're just driving around. So when you're just pottering around in the city, things like the ability to raise the suspension, to not ground out, makes a big difference. The rear wheel steer makes a huge difference, allowing this 5.2 meter long car with a 3.2 meter long wheelbase to essentially turn on a dime.
Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. Now, just before the break, we've been acquainting you with the Mercedes-AMG EQS, the all-electric vehicle from Mercedes-Benz in India today. And now we are trying to find out whether it delivers on what makes it a true AMG.
Now, to really experience the duality of the EQS 53 that we were talking about, you do have to change drive modes, because when you put it in Sport or Sport Plus, it changes that synthesized sound that's piped into the cabin, and that makes a huge difference. While this is a top tier AMG, the drive modes top out at Sport Plus. There is no race here, I think mainly by virtue of the fact that you're getting everything at max in any case. That said, Sport Plus is still the mode that you want to be in if you want to get the feel of an AMG from this EQS 53. It just sharpens everything up, and that synthesized sound definitely earns its keep. Because when you do put it in Sport Plus and you put your foot down, you get that anger, you get that fury. It almost feels like a full AMG. The build-up of pace is rapid, and it does it so silently. This could be your stealth vehicle. You even hear that slight wobbling when you stop at idle, and it plays inside the car and outside it. So when you step out and the car's still idling, you hear it, and it does make you feel like you're standing next to something special. Not quite an AMG, but hey, like we said, we've got to embrace the change. While something like the EQS 580 is entirely capable of giving you those thrills of just mashing your foot down and getting pinned back in your seat, I think what the AMG brings to the table is that extra drama, that extra feeling of tightness, because you get this in any other AMG. It's just that you don't get the feeling of those vibrations coming through the engine, that connection between the throttle pedal and your change of pace, that's a little subdued, but when you put your foot down, I think the EQS 53 is a lot more than just a one-trick pony. Thankfully, the EQS 53 isn't just exciting in a straight line. When you put it in Sport Plus, you get that nice AMG feel from it, and when you get to a set of corners, boy, you better be ready to point and shoot. So when you get to a set of twisties, you do feel like you have to muscle the car around a little bit. You do start to feel all of that 2.7 tons of weight that this thing is carrying around, but it's precise and it's got a lot of grip. You do have a little bit of weight management to take care of, but then again, your throttle response is so instantaneous. You've just got to get the car turned in, and when you put your foot back down on the throttle, it feels like it shoots straight back up to where you left off, and that's a full throttle. Man! You actually need a little bit of calibration of your driving reflexes, because you have to be very metered with your throttle foot, or you'll end up upsetting the balance of the car. It's worth noting that AMG has tuned the air suspension and even have their own bespoke suspension components in there, like the rear subframe for one, but all of that doesn't result in a typically stiff AMG ride. Over really bad patches, I do find myself appreciating the extra comfort that this particular AMG brings to the table, I don't think I've driven an AMG this compliant before. At the same time, when you do start pushing it, you do have Sport Plus to fall back on. Just kind of pick up some of that slop that you might feel if you're pushing it in comfort. And once again, duality, the AMG special. There's another thing that will take some getting used to. In an AMG, you expect those big carbon ceramic brakes with massive stopping power and bite. But in the 53, you have to recalibrate yourself a little bit because the brakes are working on friction and regen at the same time. So there's not as much bite as you might like initially, but you do push further down on the pedal and then you get that stopping power, and it is quite impressive once you do that. There are 3 levels of regen braking to choose from via the paddle shifters, with one pedal driving possible in its strongest setting. When you're driving the EQS a little quickly, I think most people would prefer to just leave it in its normal recuperation mode, because the strong recuperation actually ends up being a little too strong. It feels like you're fighting the drivetrain at times. Now, some of you might be questioning the logic of AMG really showcasing its prowess in an electric car like the EQS. Maybe the first electric car should have been something smaller, a little more agile. But here's my take on this. If they can make a car like the EQS handle this nicely, I'm sure they can make anything with a set of batteries in it handle really well. Ultimately, an AMG is about the drama of the entire drive experience, which the EQS 53 only provides in its sportiest of drive modes. While some may feel shortchanged, there's no denying that if speed is your primary reason to buy an AMG, the EQS 53 more than delivers. In fact, it shocks and leaves you in awe. If we have to embrace the change of performance motoring, I can't see a better way to do it than in this.
At the launch event, Mercedes-Benz India did mention that they plan to set up the largest electric vehicle charging network over the span of the next few years. So it will garner a lot more interest in the electric vehicle space. Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. The Audi A8 L has been known to be a quintessential business limousine with an all-work and no-play attitude reflecting in its styling. But that's all changed with the 2022 version of the Audi A8 L. The rear seat is even more plush, but is it the most luxurious offering in the country today? It's time to find out.
First off, the changes are largely cosmetic, with more personalization options added and some optional extras being added to the spec list, but we'll get to that. Like we said, the grille is all new with chrome winglets instead of those horizontal slats, which really does most of the heavy lifting in making the A8L as eye-catching as it is. Sharper headlights, more vertical air intakes, new 19-inch wheels, chrome along the sides, and new customizable OLED rear light signatures round off the changes. Inside, Audi's signature uncluttered modern look with glossed black surfaces that come to life when the screens are on make the A8L a classy place to be. The revolving AC vents are a nice touch in that same theme, and even the ambient lighting is restrained. But none of that is new. What is new are the heads-up display and additional options for trim, upholstery and the like, down to the extra display screens that can be spec'd for the virtual cockpit. Now, of course, there's been no change to the main USP of the A8L, and that's this fantastic back seat. Now, in terms of the seat comfort itself, it's maybe not quite as sink into plush soft as, say, an S-Class's rear seat, but the A8L does have a trick up its sleeve, and it's the only car to offer this level of recliner mode. Now, this takes you into full business class. Now, to show you that, I will have to take my shoes off, but that's a small price to pay to really enjoy the only car in the segment to offer a full seat massage, which you can get just via the menu. It really takes business class comfort on the road to the next level. And we haven't even begun to talk about all the personalization that's available, be it in the matrix lights, in the sunblind operations, the fantastic twin pane sunroof, and the fact that the screens can now also screen content from Netflix and via your phone directly. Now that we've got our feet up and we're truly relaxing in the back of the A8L, we can talk about the ride quality, which is another huge part of this car's experience. Now in Comfort Plus, it does a couple of things to actually keep both the front occupants and importantly the rear occupants of the car level. So what the car does is it reduces the pitching motion that you feel under hard acceleration or braking. It also will lean into a corner by about 3 degrees to negate the body roll that you feel. Now we've tried it and it definitely works. You feel the difference in Comfort Plus versus some of the other drive modes. Now one thing worth noting is that you do feel some of the smaller and sharper road irregularities filter through. Stuff like cat eyes and sharper edges of potholes definitely catches this air suspension out. What stayed the same in the A8L is its motivation. It still uses a 3-litre V6 with 340 PS and 500 Newton meters of torque, mated to an 8-speed DCT with quattro all-wheel drive. Now while not many owners are going to find themselves in this seat, it is heartening to know that the A8L is still creamy smooth and super silent. Now the responses from the engine do feel quite relaxed, and that would perfectly suit this car's role as a chauffeur-driven car because it makes driving smoothly quite easy. On the flip side, it does mean that if you want a quick overtake, you do have to make deliberate inputs at the throttle. That being said, when you do press down on it, it goes and it sounds pretty good and it revs to about a 6,500 RPM redline and you get to triple-digit speeds very quickly. I think in that respect, the A8L might have a leg up on some of its diesel-powered rivals just because it still sounds so smooth and good right through the rev range. We still managed the 0 to 100 kmph run in 6.7 seconds, which is a little down on the claimed 5.7 seconds, but it still proves that this 2-ton sedan can move when you poke it. Now the spec that we're driving does include the optional Predictive active air suspension, which is essentially adaptive. There's a camera that scans the road ahead for stuff like speed breakers and it automatically raises the car, so there's much less chances of it grounding out. That being said, you do have to take care over speed breakers because at the end of the day, this is a long wheelbase car and it is pretty low slung. Between the drive modes, Comfort Plus seems like it brings the most to the table because it really reduces the pitching motion that you can feel when accelerating, braking, or even cornering for that matter. In fact, in Comfort Plus, the suspension can counteract body roll. Yup, the car will lean away from a corner to negate those cornering G-forces that you could feel in a car this big and this heavy. In the all-important ride quality department, this car does ride on 19-inch wheels with 45-section sidewall tires, and the ride quality is plush, but it doesn't filter out some of the smaller and sharper imperfections like we spoke about from our rear seat impression. This gen Audi A8 L is the oldest at this point and is likely to be the last IC-engined A8. The new Gen S-Class offers more flash, a diesel option, and is brand new. The BMW 7 Series is also long in the tooth, but a new car is on the horizon. The new Audi A8 L, however, is still at least 2 years away and it's been previewed by the absolutely stunning Grand Sphere concept. In the meantime, the A8 L is available as a base celebration model at a price that's far lower than rivals. The fully loaded technology model clocks in at Rs 1.57 crore, but with the options ticked off, it's expensive. But, and this is important, it's also got the best rear seat experience in our books.
On that note, it's time for us to wrap up this week's edition of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube, and you can follow our latest updates on Instagram. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye. Many thanks for joining. Drive and ride safe.